Hey guys, this is Eric with Pixel Rookie, and this is episode 9 of our series following the colonists of New Raleigh 2.0. In the last episode, the colony suffered massive losses when they were attacked by an infestation of mega spiders and 2 lancers. Will they be able to continue surviving in the valley moving forward? Keep watching to find out. It was the same evening that they buried Jawless Paw, and a positive turn of events happened. Kingsize was comforting Nyron after the loss of her fiancé, Stompy, and he used a common tactic men use to flirt with women. He was bragging to her about his own leg hair, and it caused Nyron to become aroused, and at that moment, they became lovers. The next day, another heatwave was hitting the valley. They didn't realize that it was already this time of the year, but the scorching sun indicated otherwise. They needed to run the air conditioning units again. A few days later, it was time for Hot Dog to replace his missing arm with a bionic replacement. He laid in the hospital bed and waited for Kingsize to begin the operation. At this point, Kingsize was a seasoned medic, but Hot Dog still had some butterflies while waiting. Kingsize began the operation, sweating as he did, knowing that Hot Dog's life was in his hands. He was using his steady hands to carefully install the bionic arm. The operation only took around an hour, and it was a success. Kingsize went to grab some food. The operation exhausted him and left him famished. While recovering from the anesthesia, they reviewed Hot Dog's health. Everything looked great and his arm was going to be better than ever. Everyone breathed a big sigh of relief. Hoff finished constructing their first sniper rifle. Though it was poor in quality, it would still be valuable because of its superior range. Brandon M was perfectly suited for such a weapon. His bionic eye would make him a very deadly shot. He made his way into the storage area to equip it. Brandon M also had a very high crafting skill, so he'd be able to make more components for their base. They could use these to build better technology. Maybe they would even be able to construct a ship to escape this rim planet they found themselves stuck on. Just then, they received a request from another faction. Bandits were nearby and causing trouble for their caravans. They wanted help with eradicating them, and they were offering a reward of hyperweave and, more importantly, glitterwood medicine. Glitterwood medicine is the best kind of medicine out there. It would be extremely valuable if they could get their hands on it. Looking over their map, their outpost wasn't far from New Raleigh 2.0. They decided to take a strike team to ambush them and take the bandits out. Brandon M led a team that consisted of Hoff, Joey Tucker, and Alyssa. He was already going to have a chance to test out his new sniper rifle. They packed their supplies into one of their tamed muffalos and they headed out. The base felt very empty with just the 5 remaining colonists staying behind. The mood was tense knowing their comrades were headed towards potential danger. It took almost the entire day of traveling, but they finally arrived at the outpost. It was dark and raining. They could use this to their advantage. The outpost itself was small and there were only a few men patrolling the outside. Their defenses were minimal. They were confident that they could ambush them and take them out. The men took cover by a nearby wall. They hid behind it and Brandon M lined up the first shot. He steadied his aim and took his time, took a deep breath, and squeezed the trigger. The first shot was a direct hit. The bandit hid behind sandbags for cover and desperately fired back in retaliation. He missed completely. Brandon M fired again and the raider was killed instantly. 2 more raiders ran out to attack Brandon M. Joey turned and opened fire while the bandit was completely exposed. Brandon M laid cover fire and forced the other bandit to fall back. The second bandit was killed right away and the rest of them fled the outpost. They were successful and the mission went flawlessly. One of the bandits were retreating right by the men, so they continued to fire at him. Between Joey Tucker's light machine gun and Hoff's shotgun blasts, they incapacitated the bandit. Before capturing their new prisoner, they investigated the outpost. Joey Tucker broke down the door and found a small food supply. They could use these rations for their travels home. They planned their return trip with their new prisoner and scavenged supplies. Back in Raleigh 2.0, they were extending their medbay to have medicine storage right by the hospital beds. Their reward of glitterwood medicine would be very helpful if they find themselves in a bind. Checking on the raiding party, they were about halfway done with their travels. Into the early hours of September the 3rd, a raiding party was preparing to attack outside of their base on the other end of the valley. The men were preparing their defenses, but they heard gunshots in the distance. Upon further inspection, the raiders found one of their tamed boomalopes out in the open and attacked it. When it died, an explosion burst outward around 3 of the raiders, engulfing them in flames. This was a foolish move on their part and slightly wounded their men. Another of the colonist boomalopes were nearby and they went after it too. The colonists were hoping that they would kill it and cause more damage to the raiding party. It was only incapacitated though and they ignored it at that point. There was more gunfire though. Not realizing it, Brandon M's party returned from their travels right when the raiding party was preparing for their attack. They were caught off guard and left in the open. In a panic, they grouped up in a closed attack formation and began firing back. Hoff's combat shotgun didn't have the same range as the rest of the weapons. He slowly tried to maneuver into a better position so he could get a good angle on them. Shots were coming at them from everywhere. Brandon M was hit by an incoming bullet. The rest of the party groaned from the landed shot. Joey Tucker opened fire with his light machine gun and took one of the raiders out. Alyssa continued laying suppressing fire with the incendiary launcher while Hoth closed in on the raiders close to them. Brandon M was taken down while the enemy closed in on Hoth. They were able to kill another raider with a few well-placed shots. Hoth was almost at point-blank range with a raider equipped with a shotgun. They both exchanged blows while more raiders approached them from the south. Alyssa was the next to fall. Hoth finally took another raider out but was severely wounded. Joey Tucker was trying to fend off the rest of the men, but one came around the corner of the mountain with a knife. Joey Tucker engaged in melee combat with the raider. Hoth tried his best to take down the raider firing on Joey Tucker. He finally managed to land a fatal shot on him, but Joey Tucker was taken down at the same time. Now it was Hoth against 3 raiders. Hoth already had significant injuries. He was barely holding on. As the knife-wielding raider got closer to him, Hoth killed him and the rest of the men began to flee. They were safe. For now. He immediately went to rescue his men and others were on their way to help too. It was a disaster. Hoth was taking Brandon M, Hot Dog rescued Alyssa, and Niron was making her way to help Joey Tucker. They needed to hurry. At the worst possible time, a breaker blew in the base and caused a fire in the hallway. The rest of the colonists who were defending the entrance quickly broke formation and ran inside to put the fire out before it spread too far. Fortunately, they were able to put the flames out before it spread too much. Hoth was too badly injured. He collapsed on his way back to the base. He and Brandon M both laid there, slowly dying. The men hurried to their aid. An explosion was heard off in the distance. This seemed to trigger an awful chain reaction. Their wounded boomalope finally died. This wasn't a concern of theirs right now. At the same time, both Alyssa and Joey Tucker died from their wounds before making it to the med bay. They hurried to rescue both Hoth and Brandon M. They were moving as fast as they could, but they were too far from the base. Brandon M died shortly after the others. Mac kept pushing. He was carrying Hoth as fast as he could. It was the worst case scenario. Every single one of the colonists in Brandon M's raiding party died. It was a heavy blow to the rest of the colonists. Oddly enough, King Size and Niron wanted to try and calm everyone's nerves by making their wedding announcement. This massive loss to their colony made them realize it was now or never. They might not have much time left in the valley. Graves were being dug out in the crypt to honor their fallen colonists. While trying to repair the damages inside the base, Mac had a mental break and threw a tantrum. All of their loss was just too hard to bear. Angry and frustrated, he made his way to Brandon M's corpse and started hitting it. He was furious that they went out on the mission to kill the raiders, which consequently ended up being their demise. He came back to his senses shortly after. The next day, Niron threw a party to celebrate the upcoming marriage and try to boost everyone's spirits. Morale was low in New Raleigh 2.0, and they really needed something positive to take their minds off of all the loss. One of their pet puppies, Murder, somehow got into their stash of alcohol without realizing it. Their puppy developed an addiction to alcohol. It was so drunk that it passed out beside the stockpile of beer in the storage area. This was definitely an unexpected event. They would need to keep an eye on Murder moving forward. The colonists worked on the crypt so they could bury their men. Their prisoner went berserk from the extreme hunger he was feeling. They were short on men and completely forgot that he needed to be tended to. He broke free from his cell and started to escape. King Size was making his way over, but the prisoner attacked one of their pet Labradors, Zopico. The prisoner was already wounded, and Zopico defended herself and took him down. King Size still made his way over to place him back into his cell. The next day, they began burying their lost men. It was another rainy day. It felt like the valley was mourning their losses once again. Hot Dog went to get Brandon M. He was a strong fighter. It was a real shame they were ambushed as they made their way back into the valley. Finally, they buried Joey Tucker. All 4 of the colonists were laid to rest, and they were only down to 5 colonists total now. Looking over Niron, her mood was still quite low despite just getting some lovin'. She was still suffering from the loss of her first fiancé, Stompy, who only died about 19 days earlier. Later that day, a transport pod crash-landed nearby and it contained Niron's father in it. Niron immediately went to rescue him so they could recruit him into the colony. She brought him into a neighboring cell to recover, and then they could recruit him into their base. On the 8th of September, her father went berserk from the intense pain he was feeling. He began to break out of his cell. In a fit of rage, he broke into the other prisoner's cell and began attacking him. Her father was already wounded though, and after a long fight with the other prisoner, he was knocked out. King Size placed him back into his bed and treated his wounds. The next day, the other prisoner went berserk too. They weren't having much luck with recruiting either one of them. King Size made his way into the cell and confronted the prisoner. It didn't take much for King Size to take him out. Once he was knocked down, King Size placed him back into his bed to recover. The decision was made to release their prisoner and let them fend for themselves outside of the safety of New Raleigh 2.0. Sev escorted the prisoner to the exit and he made his way out of the valley. That evening, another transport pod crashed nearby with a wounded survivor. Hot Dog made his way out to capture her so they could heal her up and try to recruit her to join the colony. As soon as Hot Dog laid her in her bed, they realized her wounds were too critical. King Size woke up so he could tend to her right away, but there wasn't enough time. Sooner than she arrived, she was already dead. King Size dropped the medicine he was carrying, and in disgust, he took her corpse outside of their base. The excessive death recently was weighing heavily on the entire colony. At noon on the 11th of September, a large piece of an ancient spaceship fell from the sky and crashed into the valley right outside of New Raleigh 2.0. Nyron was transporting slag metal into the base when it landed nearby. They knew this thing was dangerous. They could just feel its presence and it was releasing poison around where it landed. They needed to gather what little strength they had left and destroy it. This is where we'll leave off for this episode. Will they be able to get rid of the new threat after already losing so many men? Stay tuned for the next episode to find out. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, have a good one.